So our session today, I bet we didn't realize that we were post-pandemic, so now I can see the word post-pandemic, so I know it's official. And this is post-pandemic and the focus on technology and innovation. I'll just briefly mention the names of our speakers here, and then I'll allow them to introduce themselves as they talk in and around this subject area. So the first one, and if I mispronounce names, I'm from Scotland, so Bill Strand from Total USA, and Dimitris Horitis, the Deputy Head of Business and Talent Attraction from Invest HK, Hong Kong. Always like that city. And Samantha Ndendri, who's the Dean of the College of Computing and Software Engineering. So, Roy, we'll start with you, please. So just take a couple of moments to introduce yourself, and then you can kind of just launch into this topic area.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ferguson. The previous panel was so nice, excellent, I could say, and before that, the Consular of Japan and Indonesia, they were talking all about those good things. It might be repetitive for you guys to listen those things again from this panel and following panel as well, but they have set the ground or set the stage how this entire event is going to be. So myself, Nagendra Roy, I am a founder and CEO of NC Code. I worked almost maybe over 20 countries in my past career, and well versed with different cultures. That is the success story or the success month behind me. We have to be global. At 1992, maybe I was in 10th standard. I grew up and studied in India, and we came to know the word globalization, and we did not know what is it, but I was so excited and thrilled about it, and I decided to see and do something in a global aspects, and here we are. So I'm associated with SAUPO and all Dr. Mays and her team. Last week I was in London, so we are expanding in Europe and Australia too. So education is not just making an impact to you, for you, your life right now. We are making an impact, making the students' readiness from high school to colleges, and what will be the different attributes and the characters we can go with and understand and plan accordingly, proactively, rather than doing something reactive. So that is where we are heading towards. Our prime objective is to make an impact to the next generation by enabling those institutes or organizations worldwide, whether it's the federal government, state government, or it's a private corporate sector. So that is where we are. Thank you so much.
And our next speaker is Bill Strang.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Bill Strang. I'm corporate president of Toto. I watch after our e-commerce, retail, and after-service business. I've been with Toto for about 20 years. And as you may be aware, Toto is a very unique company, bringing both bathroom products and our wash of the day toilet seat to the world, which has changed lives. We're going to talk a little bit about that today as we talk about the post-pandemic and the pandemic moment, March of 2020, where we actually saw an incredible amount of sales and awareness of bidets because there was no toilet paper. And so as a result of that, we had a great opportunity to grow. Now, and we'll talk more about this, it's really quite interesting. I'm an industrial engineer by background. That's my education, that's my background in trade. I've been in manufacturing all my life. When I graduated from industrial engineering, back then, I went into manufacturing, and manufacturing was considered the 4 Ds: dirty, dark, dangerous, and dead end. But we have found over the years that manufacturing has been going through a very significant renaissance, and it continues to evolve. And as we now see the opportunities for both globalization and localization to play an important role in the geopolitical fluctuations in the marketplace and in the world, it's important for us to have a strong footprint in all the countries where we operate. And so that's what Toto's been able to do. I've been able to be a part of that for about 20 years now, and I look forward to talking a little bit more about this as we go on in the panel, and you'll learn a lot more about Toto's, maybe than you want to really know. So, thank you.
Demetrius?
So Demetrius Soriadis, I'm with Invest Hong Kong. We are an economic development agency of the Special Administration Region of Hong Kong, which is obviously a Chinese city. But within that remit, what we look to do is to help foreign companies to enter Asia and do that through Hong Kong, given certain advantages that Hong Kong still enjoys, such as common law, as well as robust IP protection. And then, of course, English being one of the official languages of the city. And so, you know, I would normally be here with my director, Candy Nip, but she was not able to attend, so you have me instead. She's a much better speaker, but I'll try and make do as much as I can. And within Invest Hong Kong, I focus in on the innovation and technology space, which is, I guess, why I'm actually on this panel. So I help North American and South American companies that are looking to go into Asia, specifically focused on technology, which I think the previous panel mentioned many of the challenges that we're certainly facing between Asia and the US currently, and much of those challenges are also within the technology space, and obviously data being a very important aspect, as well as cybersecurity. So my job is never boring. It's very interesting to try and help American companies to understand how to go into the Chinese market. In my personal opinion, I see that there's three major trading blocks. It's North America, Europe, and Asia. And within Asia, it's China. And so I think the previous Consul General in Indonesia mentioned that, you know, much of the future in terms of economics and trade will be in Asia, so American companies really need to understand how to do that business in that section of the world. And so hopefully I'm doing my part to kind of bring those two regions together within trade and investment. And I guess as the panel goes on, we'll talk more about how innovation has changed both our organization, but also what I've seen in terms of how companies are using innovation technology.
Tomorrow's weather is not going to be so good, but so do everything you can to enjoy today, okay? So I grew up in India, just like my fellow panelists, and I came to the United States just before the turn of the century. I've lived here for longer than I have in the country I was born. And my path has been education, education, and education. And it's been a wonderful journey. Home is Georgia. And I cannot imagine a better place to be raising my family and living and contributing and working in the institution I'm associated with. I do want to talk a little bit about what we do in the College of Computing and Software Engineering. We are the second largest college of computing in the state of Georgia, and we probably are in the top 10 in the nation. We have PhD students, we have master's students, we have undergraduate students. The main emphasis is technology, whether it is virtual reality, cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, data mining, the list goes on. And we all know that this is the age of technology and you're all living it. It influences it in so many ways. One of the things that we do is to address the workforce needs. Most of our students, like in engineering, stay in Georgia. We have built relations with international organizations and some countries to bring international students, especially from Asia. We have a lot of representation from all countries around Asia, and we continue to build so, not just in terms of students, but also our faculty. We want to represent the kind of students that we serve, and most importantly, the pandemic has affected or has worked through its magic, if you were to use that word, because it was magic for the first panelist, right, the salesman. It's been challenging from an academic perspective and an academic enterprise. What we do within our institution, how we work, has been very different to what happens in other industries. I'd be very willing to work with any of you and all of you who would like to find ways or pathways to engage with our college and our university. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I thought we'd start with one or two questions from up on the stage. And the first one would be, during the pandemic, there's a number of innovations that your companies, your organizations may have brought in that didn't exist before. So maybe you could just talk a little bit in and around that area, what was needed for that time and what you think would be useful for all times. So, whoever wants to start.
Let me take this first. So, as we took our company birth right before pandemic, so we were going with a very traditional way of doing business, which was there, established those standards like a decade ago. But soon we realized we have to be agile and we have to have that business agility in terms of adopting those economical or external factors which is going to be impacting your business and your customers too. So we soon changed our approach in terms of doing the business differently. The previous panelist, I forgot his name, but SK Battery, they said they hate working from home. So, and Jessica was mentioning, we have to be flexible enough in terms of adopting whether we have to be on site or where we can be, work from home. So earlier, if somebody is working from home, like 5 years ago before pandemic, that was treated as an offense.
Maintain its continuity even till today. And so now the day is no longer sort of
in Atlanta, Georgia. I had students in Berlin working there and also in France, in Metz. So you discover that 24/7 is whenever anybody happens to be awake and doing something. So there are certain downsides of that connectivity as well. So the pandemic, again, created these lasting effects on innovation and in your organizations. I know it's in the area of education, for example, it's made online education a lot more viable than it was before. So I'd like to get a sense of what you think is going to be lasting as a consequence of this sea change. And if you have some comments maybe to make relative to manufacturing areas, onshoring versus offshoring. I know prior to the pandemic, people talked a lot about offshoring, and that seemed to turn around and become an issue of onshoring, especially if you have to make a lot of B-days. So maybe if you'd like to talk about what's going to stay.
And so as a global company, we want to make sure that we are in fact global, not just sending containers to a country and then putting product into the marketplace. And so Toto made the decision early on to make a manufacturing facility located in Atlanta, Georgia. The airport played an important role in that, the dynamics of the education system within Georgia, but also the access and affordability of the raw materials that we use. We use dirt, clay, right? We get kaolins from Sandersville, Georgia. We get ball clays from Nashville, Tennessee, bring them together, mix them into a compound, create our toilets. In that process, we want to make sure that the toilets that we're producing and made in USA are important for our business, but it's also crucial that we utilize the skill sets and the technologies that are available across the globe. So on our global presence, Toto is a global company. We've got facilities located all throughout Southeast Asia. We've got facilities in Mexico. We've got facilities in South America. But what is really key to this is we pull and draw in the very best talent from around the world. In fact, I've got a team of guys and gals going to Japan now to train with other colleagues from around the world, Indonesia, Malaysia, India, Taiwan, China, Japan, USA, coming together to work on technologies and opportunities for continued growth and a collaborative process that incorporates a global presence. And by doing that, we believe we can withstand some of the mitigations that are going to be important for us when you look at the cyclicality of the marketplace and things like, Ukraine as an example, and the disruption that will cause. We want to make sure that we mitigate that, and in fact, for our major customers, we actually have to give them our mitigation program on what we're doing to make sure that things like Russian invasions to Ukraine don't disrupt our business if it were to occur somewhere else.
Nicely said, Bill. So, in India, we have in our native language, which is very, there are two words which says Vasudev Kutumbakam, which is nothing but the world is a global village. So, and it was written like centuries ago, and now everybody is following that and embracing those changes, which is coming to this type of thing what just Bill mentioned. Working in a global environment is a cultural shift for so many different companies where they did not go far and go onshore or offshore. Doesn't matter. Like there was a question about the labor and the pricing point and all those different things. But if doing the right things in a right way is the message is coming out from all this disruption, whether it's from Russia or Ukraine or it's from India or China or US or Japan or anybody from the world. And Jessica was rocking in that session. I can tell you that the consistency, the culture, the collaboration, the cohesiveness, all those different things are, getting into the business and realizing all these different entrepreneurs and the leaders. And it's our responsibility to make it or do it right. ChatGPT can be used in so many different ways, but it's us how we are going to make use of it in the right way, for the right reason, for the right purpose.
I'll talk from an academic perspective. We already live in a world where we're trying to make sure students graduate within 4 years, have less debt, find jobs, and all of this, right? So how do you engage them when everything goes online? There are different kinds of disciplines that cannot jump in and start doing things the way we want them to be engaged and motivated with. So a lot of thought went into it. I do want to address what Dean Ferguson said about being hesitant for online delivery. But online delivery is going to give us accessibility, right? When you can have access, you might be in a small village, wherever you are in the world, you can still access the content that we are serving. Teleworking is definitely there to stay, no doubt about that. When a job or duties lends itself, it makes every sense for that to be in there, and social interactions has its place. When it comes to innovation, there are lots of things KSU did. Making sure we had a digital learning policy to have standards in how we were to go and offer our content, and also people to help us put that content together in terms of instructional technologies. There were also learning workshops to help faculty, students, everybody understand the best practices to learn in such an environment. All of these things, I believe, are going to be there to stay. A lot more programs have now gone towards being offered in other modalities just than face-to-face. Some of the things that have come about, one thing definitely is AI, OpenAI, and ChatGPT, which we've talked about. The other that I see is virtual reality, immersive way of learning things. There have been digital twins and metaverse and multiple universities opening up their twin universities so that the student who is taking a history class is actually in Greece, experiencing whatever happened at the time. So there are certain kinds of innovative solutions that have come forth, and they will build and they will evolve and they'll mature and they will have an influence, and they are to stay.
So my first part question is the genesis of this is from Bill's comment on distinguishing between globalization and localization. Thank you. I am curious about the localization part, particularly in the geopolitical world right now. I know the rise of companies in China, such as Tencent, Baidu, Didi, Alibaba. These are household names in China because they've created their own ecosystem, probably in response to maybe US companies trying to enter into the Chinese market. So my question is, do you all have any predictions as to industries or standards that may be going global or that may be emerging global in a country such as China, maybe in an industry such as AI or virtual reality. So that's the first part of my question.
Maybe unpopular or it's premature to say, but very soon every one of us will realize globalization is a localization. We will not be able to distinguish so much, okay, what is local and what is global, because all the companies or all the entrepreneurs, they want, because it's a end user customer marketplace, the experience they want to give it to their customers has to be local in terms of experience as well as the post-sale supports as well. So believe me, like the big organizations like Microsoft or IBM or any other, you can say Amazon, they have their local presence in those countries wherever they do their business. So globalization is a localization nowadays, and it's going to be to the next level very soon when we will realize, okay, there is nothing called like localization or globalization, it's all together. It's maybe I'm deviating your question, but I'm just trying to give you this kind of inputs or insight, what I feel. And it might lead to another question, or you might have the second fold of your questions right now.
If I may add, just on the Chinese opportunities, I think despite all the politics that we're seeing and the back and forth, I think two sectors I feel will emerge. If you have a solution to a health problem, you can sell that globally. And then I also believe that most of the people within the world believe that we should live in a carbon neutral society. And so anything that goes into technology that goes into performing that, and taking CO2 out of the atmosphere, I think that will also be a big opportunity. So I think despite all the politics, they can still agree on those two sectors.
In addition to what Dimitri said, I think food insecurity as well. That's another thing across the globe that has a common value of what you mentioned.
And from Toto's standpoint, what we find out, I mean, frankly speaking, we have a global awareness and a global brand, but we bring ideas and concepts and innovations from around the world and then incorporate it into our local manufacturing methodologies. So the machines we use at our Morrow factory are manufactured and produced by Japanese technology. We actually use Indonesian workers to help do that build-up of that product as we bring it over here as kits. We build the machines, we put the factory together, and then we put them in the marketplace. But what's really crucial for me, at least, is when we start talking about ESG and carbon footprint, and that's an important part of what we look at for the future, most important for us is how we incrementally reduce the carbon footprint of the products we bring in the marketplace. And that carbon footprint is crucial. We actually measure, I can tell you the carbon footprint of a toilet, the ecotoxicity, application, and characteristics of that toilet use every day in your home, because we measure the embedded energy content in a gallon of water. That embedded energy in the United States is higher than it is in China. It is higher than it is in Indonesia. It's higher than it is in California than it is in Chicago. And so we manufacture products unique for the local manufacturing and the local region to reduce the impactfulness of the carbon footprint. And whether or not you believe in carbon or not, global warming, carbon is the big C in carbon is the big dollar sign in cost, because carbon is a consumption of a resource, and if we don't consume that resource, we don't pay the money.
And before you move on to the second part of your question, I just want to do a slight follow-on here. We talked about online and people working permanently in other locations, so there's issues relative to employment law, even between states and not in this country, and obviously employment laws internationally. And do you want to make some comments on some of the issues that you may have had to address and some difficulties you may have had to address, just even about differences in employment law in this country, state to state or international?
Well, go ahead.
Yeah, so different states, different countries, different languages, different laws, regulations, comes in between to do business in a smoother way. But everybody is learning, I would say, and And before pandemic, we did not know even how we are going to make use of this virtual platforms in education and healthcare and all those different things. But as I'm hoping the world is able to acknowledging all these changes and require a lot of changes in the regulations and laws and business regulations and all those different things. We hope to see more, easy way to do business across countries, across borders, and those different things. That's my hope, and we are getting towards it in terms of making it more realistic rather just making it on the papers. So I see the problems when we hire new candidate from New York and we have a new employee from California. Two different states, two different type of HR policies we have to go with, and country-wise, if I need to hire somebody from Canada for my US client, it's a totally different thing. So I hope one day it will be one earth, one business type of regulations, one currency.
That will be coming in the next 30 years is apparent. Are there emerging India companies that we may not have heard of today and are not common in our vernacular, our business vernacular yet? Are there Indian companies that we should be aware of and watch for up and coming development?
Absolutely, 100%. And it's not just from India, it should be from all developing countries, whether it's from Asia or it's from Africa. I see a lot of companies, startups, they are doing investment in innovation and invention in their respective areas of doing business and adding value to the current world problems. So I cannot name those companies, but I can tell you it's coming from everywhere to everywhere, right from Asia or India, China, Indonesia, Australia, anywhere.
One thing I'd like to add is that, as my co-panelists talked about startups, because the question is with respect to India. Before 2014, for a population that has more than 1 billion, they had 1,600 startup companies. That is pretty pathetic. And in the past 8 years, it went from 1,600 to 68,000, with at least tens of unicorns already established. One company that I saw, just blossom was Baiju. It's about teaching kids how to learn math, physics, and all kinds of stuff. There's just so many of them, and of course, it is now partnered with Disney. And there are just so many of such wonderful stories, and I think the mentality about finding solutions and these startup companies are coming from all over the place. Technology is just enabling them to solve all kinds of problems, whether be it in preserving coral reefs, whatever that might be.
In fact, adding to what just Suman said is, I had a meeting with the Baiju's directors and the Ministry of Education in India with some of my colleagues. Like these technology companies, these edutech companies are also triggering the conversation for new policies in respective countries, like new education policy in India, which is getting implemented right now. So it's not only one way, it's vice versa, where technology companies are doing those things or making those things available to those education institutes, as well as these companies are also triggering those changes which education institutes can start thinking about it and do those changes.
Technically competent, but to have them technically competent and not be able to share that competency and what that will mean for the business makes it not as worthwhile. And for us, in addition to that, is we're manufacturers, so we also look for, love graduates from Georgia Tech and Kennesaw and UGA and all those, but much more important for me, in many cases, is how can someone actually work on a machine to make it continue to function and integrate the technology into that machine and work on the challenges that are associated with it not working properly.
And having the practical approach and that mindset of leading the work is very important nowadays versus just having a certification or a degree from a university.
And they can actually reduce it to practice, so they can think, they have the intellectual depth, they can reduce it to practice, they can make it something you can use, and they're equipped professionals in that their interpersonal skill sets allow them to effectively communicate within a team and relative to the work they've been doing. So we have the integrated engineer in our college. Samantha, did I?
Totally agree with what Bill was talking about in the sense of clarity in communication. At least in our college, I include myself, a bunch of nerds, we're happy. We had a fellow speaker yesterday, and he was a former student in our college who won an Oscar award for his technical prowess. And he shared a joke. He was in the computer lab just typing away, and a fellow student, a girl, comes in and says, "I'm engaged." Everybody in the lab look at her and then go back to typing. It was that moment where the communication side of how we have to engage, the social side of things, and what we need to do is important. The second aspect we try to teach them is, it's awesome to go get a job, but to have an entrepreneurial thinking. Can you put that new idea together? Can you be offering those jobs? These are some of the soft side of skills that we try to teach them because we want them to be successful after they graduate, not just, finishing up their degrees.
I'm part of George Louis' delegation from Chicago, and I missed my chance speaking earlier in the first panel. But anyway, I'm celebrating my 60th year in America and 50 years as a homeowner. Something like this is not easy. One day, but I think each panel should be a full day, expanding. Okay, so I have a suggestion. Raise $1 million to expand this 5 days. Okay, so are you supportive of such an idea to make it like multiple days?
This is Michael Glover. I'm a major in international relations. So I was kind of wondering, of course when the pandemic hit, stakes were high for everyone, and I'm sure the initial panic was absolutely insane to handle. How did you move past or control it? And then has it affected the way that you're going to approach hysteria in the future? And what insight were you able to gain about yourself as a leader after?
Several kinds of workforces. We've got direct labor employees who speak very little English. We've got highly educated engineers and technicians who run the machines and the equipment and design our products. Each one of them are able to function differently. Our engineers kept on working. We had Google Meets. We kept engineering. We kept selling. It kept moving forward. However, the workers in the factory were not able to work. And that for them can be very desperate because in some cases, they make a good salary at Toto, but they may not always be fiscally responsible. And so as a result of that, a week's loss in pay could be problematic for them financially. So being able to actually have the wherewithal for Toto to say, okay, we have a workforce that is at risk. We want to make sure they are not at risk. How do we do that? Let's make sure we pay them, keep them with health insurance, keep them employed. They stayed on the payroll during the time of full lockdown. When you couldn't even drive on the roads. We were able to do that and do it effectively. And when they came back, they were crazy grateful and delighted that they were able to actually function well. Some said, I'm glad to be out of the house, I want to work. But also, they were able to say, thank you for having the wherewithal and the understanding of the dynamics of that person's life and what was important for them. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So, adding to what Bill says, right? Mentorship and the kind of work culture what we are offering to our workforce, the communication basically has to be done differently after this, during this pandemic and after the pandemic. We realized that will make a lot of difference in a long run, because that is going to dictate your culture, how the company operates, and having the work culture embedded into their day-to-day life. So the mentorship for those people who are not there yet, or they have some struggle, or the emotional intelligence, which is more important than artificial intelligence.
Done a certain way before. I think they really realize that can't always be done that way, and so being able to be flexible, adaptable, and kind of roll with the punches, I think that's what the leaders within our organization were really able to do, and kind of continue the mission and vision of our organization.
Very much. I'd like to add just one word to adaptability: sustainable ways of doing things and growing at scale.
Problems are solved not by an individual, as you were saying in some sense. It's solved by teams and appropriately engaging the relevant stakeholders to solve those particular problems. It may not always be the same group of people, but I think one of the real strengths of this institution was the leadership during that time, and the ability in Kennesaw for us to engage across different teams to solve different problems, to work interactively together, and with a focus on the end result, which was you, as a student in our programs, and appropriately serving and supporting you during these difficult times. And we appreciate you being part of our program, as we do for the other students who are here today.